All right, good evening and welcome back again, Realty Pros. This evening, we are starting our spring new agent training series. And as always, our new agent training series is not just for new agents in the industry, but these are the fundamentals of your real estate agency endeavors. So everything from working with buyers to your buyer brokerage agreement, your contracts, negotiating those offers, to your listing agreements, listing presentations, and so forth and so on. We're going to cycle through all of the fundamentals within it's in your BrokerMint library in your new agent training series. So we're going to begin tonight with working with buyers. All right. So there are going to be a number of you on the line who I'm going to pull on because you've had quite a number of experiences and you will have things to add to the group. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and get started. All right, working with buyers. Somebody tell me, and of course there's a hint right on the screen, what is the very first step in working with buyers? What do you have to do in order to secure the buyer, if you will? And go ahead and take yourselves off mute, jump into the conversation. All right, I'll give you a hint. It's called converting leads. And this is something that should be top of mind for all of us, considering that we now have the Boomtown Grow package. With Boomtown, you're going to get quite a number of buyer leads in there. And the very first step in order to make that buyer your client is going to be to convert them. So this process of conversion or converting that lead into a buyer, this is going to be some of, I would say, this is where you're going to put in the most sweat equity in some instances. Can anybody talk me through what we mean in terms of converting leads into buyers? Tell me what's included in that process. How about phone calls, following up with a buyer, scheduling your buyer consultation? It may take you sending them some listings, or it may take you sending them some things to kind of pique their interest. It may take you servicing them and following up with them maybe 8 to 12 times if they are an online lead before they ever even come to the point where they're in your buyer consultation with you. But I wanted to encourage you guys in this area of converting leads into the buyers, because this is going to be the most important part of your buying process. Once you convert that lead into a buyer, somebody tell me what the difference is from a lead to an actual buyer. And I'll go to the next slide just to give you guys a hint there. Converting leads into buyers. If they're a lead, they're somebody who's expressed interest in buying a property. Once they become a buyer, that means that they're pre-approved. So in order to convert them into a client, the next step, what has to happen in order to convert them from a lead through the buyer and then to a client? All right, I'm going to start calling on some people because I have a lot of rock stars on the line and I know you're not shy.
Hello, everybody. This is Margaret.
Hello, Margaret.
So to convert from a lead to a buyer, they would need to first be pre-approved as such. And then from a buyer to a client, that's the exclusively agreement to work with them.
Excellent. Thank you, Margaret. Awesome. I heard you. It sounds like you unmuted yourself as well, Darlene. Did you have something to add?
I was going to say agreement, the buyer's agreement.
You got it. So let's talk about this process, because this is where you earn your keeps, if you will, or this is where you earn the business. This buyer consultation process in which you're going to get your buyer agency agreement signed. Somebody tell me some of the aspects of your buyer consultation. What's the purpose of that? What do you hope to accomplish? And what do you walk away with? And there are some hints up on the screen for you, but I want to make sure that all of us are on the same page. because the Porterhouse way, there's a specific buyer consultation and a way that it's done. Just as well as the listing presentation, there's a specific method and it's highly effective. So when you follow it the way that we have it prescribed for you guys, you're going to be getting those buyer agency agreements signed left and right with your full commission commitment there. So tell me about your buyer consultation. What things are necessary in order to have, you know, a successful buyer consultation?
I'll go. So you will introduce yourself and your brokerage. Let them know why they should work with you, not that they just should, but why they should, what we represent and stand for, that we are governed by the National Association of Realtors, follow code of ethics. And then we move into the benefits, the gains, capital gains, that you can earn. We talk about I think it was for married and single people, depending on your client. And you let them know all of the benefits of home ownership and the beginning of generational wealth. And then, you let them know things that they can expect up front, so there are no surprises. You go through the different fees that they have to pay readily, and the fees that they'll have to have, a guesstimation of, or at least the percentages of the fees that they'll have to pay at closing. And, the 1031 method, you go through all of those things to give them a porterhouse experience.
Somebody has been studying their buyer consultation. Excellent. That was a great answer, Margaret. Is there anything else, guys? And of course, we'll go through our entire buyer consultation, but not tonight. But just as the features, advantages, and benefits that Margaret was doing such a great job at listing there. Is there anything else that we want to establish with the buyers? Let me ask the question this way. What do you expect the result of your buyer consultation to be? And a hint is the very last bullet point that's on the page. It kind of points you in that direction. When we say that you earn your keeps with your buyer consultation, you don't talk about your commission before you've earned it. You earn your commission in the eyes of the buyer by presenting yourself as a professional. Like Margaret went through, there's some things that are going to be features, advantages, and benefits of home ownership. And you would be surprised at the number of buyers who have purchased homes and have not taken full advantage of all the features because they were not aware of these things. So when you establish yourself as the professional and you're educating your buyer throughout this buyer consultation, then now you've set yourself apart in the mind of the buyer. Now they not only do they know you, but now they trust you as a real estate professional. So you are establishing yourself as the expert in the eyes of the buyer. You're showing them why they need you to walk them through the process. You're displaying your expertise in their eyes, and you're establishing that level of trust with them. And once you've done that, then they are more than willing to sign that agency agreement, to pay your $795 as your retainer fee. They're willing to sign off on your full commission and all of those things because you've done a thorough job representing yourself as a real estate professional in that initial consultation. Any thoughts? Any comments, any concerns with regards to the buyer consultation process and the purpose of all of it? I heard somebody unmute themselves a little bit earlier. All right, if you don't have any thoughts with regards to that, we'll move on to the next page. As you have some insight or input, go ahead and unmute yourselves. Okay, so after you've done that buyer consultation and you've gotten your agency document signed, you already have that pre-approval because that was the first step in converting them from a lead to a buyer, getting them pre-approved. Then converting them from a buyer into a client was getting your agency document signed. Now you're going to start their home searching. You're going to start sending them properties. And Margaret mentioned the 1031 formula. Talk to us a little bit about that 1031 formula, Margaret, for anybody that's on the line who has not yet used that formula. And if you
Okay.
have, just to reinforce its efficacy.
So when you set the buyers up on the MLS to receive the automated list, you have them select 10 homes that they like or would possibly want to see. Then you narrow it down to 3 homes that you actually, start out with your showings on. And then one of them they should absolutely fall in love with and put an offer in on it, because you don't want to keep showing tons and tons of houses, though this is being understood in a very normal market. But and with offers being accepted immediately, or without 25 others to be considered. And so you don't want to keep showing homes over, because some people are chronic home seers. They like to see the home. So that's what the 1031 method is to let them know, hey, you're down to business, let's get this done, and possibly get the home closed and in the 30 to 45 days that you've discussed in your buyer's consultation.
Very well stated. I want to reiterate something. You will oftentimes have window shoppers, buyers who love to watch HGTV, love to go see properties, love to watch Flip My House. And because you're a real estate professional, you have the key to every property in whatever state you're licensed in. So buyers would love to come alongside you to, just walk out their fantasies of walking through all these homes. So one of the things that Mr. Porter and I did many years ago to just help to improve the quality of buyers that we got is when we established that upfront $795 cost. Because before we did that, we had a lot of window shoppers who would be with you 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, and many times never purchased, but just going around to see homes. Another thing we did as well was to establish that 1031. But I'll just say for a moment, with that $795 being that upfront charge there, buyers then became very serious, because just like when they're purchasing a home and they have a down payment, when they put skin in the game, now they're very serious and they want to see results. So that gave us a much higher quality buyer. It increased our return on investment in terms of closing, whereas a buyer may have taken 6 to 9 months or a year before, that buyer was ready to close in 30 to 60 days because they had put their bread on the water. Okay. That is the same process with the 1031. Instead of them looking at the market and say by chance they, you do an auto search for them and they get 100 homes that come over to meet their criteria, or 50. Instead of having them to send you all those homes and you figuring out how to schedule them, we require for them to put some sweat equity in up front. So to further elaborate on that, we require that they go through what Mr. Porter calls the big ball of wax in the beginning, which is that full list of properties that are available in their price point. And for them to pull out their 10 absolute favorite, that requires for them to look at the photos, look at the remarks, to make sure that everything is there, is what meets their home search criteria that they have given to you in your buyer consultation. So this is their legwork, right? This is also going to ensure that they are not wasting their time or yours on just looky-loo properties. We're making sure that before they even go to the property, they've said, these are my 10 favorite. And of the 10 favorite, the top 3. So if you've already narrowed it down to only the favorites and the top 3 of all of those, just like Margaret said, when you get to see those, they should be ready to write an offer on one of them. And that's a commitment that you're going to get in advance at your buyer consultation. Does anybody have any questions about that? Any questions or comments?
I
All
have
right.
a comment.
Sure.
One of the things I know that I've done recently with buyers is because when I first joined Porterhouse and had to buy my first buyer with Porterhouse, that woman took me around the mulberry bush, and then I, had to pull in the ropes and say, okay, she needed some direction, because even though she chose her 10, they were like all over the place, and so, or we would go there and she wouldn't like them. So then that's when I started with, like, if they pick out what they like, I wanted them to go ride in the neighborhood to make sure this, maybe the house they see, through the pictures, but go in the neighborhood and see if this is where you would like to live. Because what I ran into is that, they'll pick this house out, and then when we go there, it's like, oh, I don't like this neighborhood, or I didn't know it was like this over here. So I would suggest maybe, telling your buyers to, ride in the neighborhood to see if it's someplace, that you're gonna like. Because from my experience, it was like a headache, just, mindless driving around in circles, and it was just, that was definitely a waste of time for me.
Excellent insight. Thank you for sharing that, Darlene. That is great advice. Great advice. Another piece that we'll pull out for that is just segmenting, if you will, your showings. If your buyer is, if you're doing your due diligence to help to focus them, but they're kind of in Charles County, in Montgomery County, as well as Howard County, and you're trying to kind of narrow their focus, then of course you do want to make sure that whatever your showings are, you're clumping everything into one day. But Darlene, that was very well stated. It's all about location, location, location. So make sure that they actually like the location of the properties that they're sending over to you before you schedule those tours. And sometimes it's going to work well like that. Sometimes the buyer won't be able to, sometimes they will. So we will, you won't make the buyer do that as a prerequisite for you scheduling the showing, but that is absolutely an excellent recommendation or suggestion for your buyer. Okay. Another thing I want to say is very much like Margaret said with the 1031, that is the rule. There are some exceptions to the rule. I will say, since we started that process, it works in about 70 to 80% of our buyers. There's that 20 to 30% that you got to keep refocusing them. And of course, we know that circumstances in the market oftentimes dictate how effective that can be. If, we're in a market where there's so many competing offers on each property, it can take a little bit longer with competition. But I want to make sure that you guys reserve to hold on to that as the rule, even when exceptions arise, because that is it's going to drastically increase your productivity and the efficiency of all of your showings with your buyers. All right. What about scheduling tours? Tell me what you guys see. And I get calls sometimes about scheduling tours on properties. What are some of the measures for scheduling tours on properties? Showing time is definitely one of them. A lot of people use showing time nowadays. Some people use CSS. Can anybody think of anything else? Every now and again, you're going to come across a listing, where in your showing instructions, it'll say reach out to the agent, or the seller will open the door. Whatever it is, you're going to see in bright MLS. So follow the showing instructions from there. I'm over here choking, guys. Excuse me. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions or comments about that? All right, we're going to keep going through this so we can actually get into your buyer agency documents. Let's talk about property tours. Property tours. We want to create an experience for the buyer, right? So your fundamentals are right here on the page, but I want for you guys to go a little bit further than just your fundamentals. As a Porterhouse agent, our motto is because you deserve the best. And if that's what you endeavor to create as an experience for each one of your clients, think of some things that you can do to help to of course, and to heighten the experience that your buyers are having on their tours. Is there anything that you guys can think of that you can do to improve the experience that your buyers are having when they go out with you as a showing agent or the buyer's agent on those tours? I can think of some things right offhand. Of course, showing up early for the property and previewing it. Get there before your client. Get there way in advance of your client. If your showing is at 5 p.m., you should be there by probably 4:30 at the latest. If you're running late, maybe, 4:45 or so. But you should be able to walk through the property before your client ever gets there. Open the doors, turn on the lights. If you need to open up the blinds, you should be able to do that before your client gets there. You should know the lay of the land, so to speak, so that when they come in, you have a little bit more than the information that you've read in your MLS printout. You can actually show them through the property and give them a guided tour, being sure to point out all of the features and the highlights that they say that they're looking for in a house, okay? You need to also pay attention in the event that there are any detractors. You know how to kind of manage those before the client even gets there. Does anybody else have any other questions or suggestions?
Yeah, Miss Porter, I had a question real quick. So what if you show up to a property and you're there early, but there's, other people there showing their clients. Like, what do you do?
So that's a great question. And what you might do is you may schedule the tour for 5 o'clock and you may have your clients to meet you there at 5:15, or you may have your clients to meet you there a little bit after, because you cannot go to the tour earlier than your scheduled time, but you can schedule it so that you give yourself a buffer to be there before your client. Either that, or you can schedule a property preview so that you're able to view it before your client gets there. Because you'll find that as you take clients on showings, you'll get to know their taste. And there's some properties that you'll walk in, right offhand, you'll say, oh my goodness, this is not going to work for my client. And you want to know that before the client comes through the door. You want to be able to be prepared to manage and mitigate that situation.
Thank you. That was good.
You got it. Excellent question. How about if it's the first showing of the day? If maybe you guys are going in the morning, maybe you're going in the evening, but how about you meet your client there? You have some Starbucks or some Dunkin' Donuts or whatever their favorite treat is. How about you bringing that for your client? How about you standing outside the property, before they go in, and you're going over some information for the client so they know what to expect? How about if you've gone through no more than 3 tours in one day, you're at the end of maybe the 3rd tour, what are some things that you can do to just make sure that your client is getting the most possible out of their tours? One of the things that I'll say right offhand, making sure that you have the property information available, but that you've already viewed the property information. So when you get there, you shouldn't be a blank slate, in that you're taking your client to see this property, but you don't know the year it was built. You don't know the square footage. You don't know if it has an HOA, and if so, how much the HOA is, the bedroom, bathroom ratio, or whether or not it's been renovated, updated, and all those things. You need to have working knowledge of that information before you get to the property, because rest assured your client is going to ask you questions when they get there, okay? The good thing is that everything that we've been doing for many years has been digital, in that the property information, we look it up right on HomeSnap, so you're able to pull it up on your phone and go through it with your clients when you get there. But oftentimes clients appreciate having a printout. So if you're taking them to see a property, you may have a folder and you may print out the 3 MLS sheets with all the property details for your client. If your client's one of those people that appreciates the printouts, then do that. That's a part of the service. If they're one of the people that appreciates having everything electronically, then you send it to them electronically so that they have the HomeSnap features of the property to look at. But for you, I recommend that you have both as an option. Have your printout and have the MLS, your HomeSnap piece pulled up on your cell phone. because inevitably you will get into an area that has bad cell phone reception. And when you're attempting to pull up the information on HomeSnap, then inevitably it'll happen where you won't be able to pull that information up electronically, even when you're prepared with it already ready on your phone. So have a printout, be prepared, and then you will have a successful showing with your client. All right. How about feedback? Tell me some of your conversations when you're getting feedback from your clients after showings. Well, let me ask you this. What does successful feedback sound like coming from a client?
I would say, the features that the highlight of the features that they liked in the house, them placing furniture, imaginatively in there, in the home, and where this would go, that would go, and using language that suggests an offer be made.
Excellent. What if a client says, I think this might work, I'm not sure, maybe? What do you think about that type of feedback from a client? Do you want to encourage a client who says those things to submit an offer on the property?
No.
Excellent. Glad you said that. Remember, before we even got to the showing, we said that of all of the properties in the market, they were to choose their 10 favorite, and then the 3 all-time favorite out of those. We want to help this client to buy a property that they are absolutely going to be happy with. They're going to like this property and enjoy it for the next 5, 10, 20 years, or however long they're going to be there. So you want to be sure that if the property is not a good fit, you don't try to force it. The property is going to sell itself, in that the buyer knows what they're looking for, and you will know when that property is the right fit for the buyer. It's kind of like, I'm not sure how many of you have a dog or a puppy, and not that I'm comparing our clients to it, but you'll notice, like with the puppy, they'll get all excited and you see their tail wagging. You don't even have to wonder, that person or the puppy in that sense is very excited. But if there's no excitement and they're just walking around kind of looking, somewhat analytically, and, you see that their countenance is just a little bit, nonplussed, if you will, that's not the property that you want to encourage your buyer to write an offer on. Does anybody have any thoughts or comments in light of that? All right, let me ask you this question. What if you're at a property and you're doing tours and you notice a number of items of disrepair? At property A, you notice that maybe there's some electrical wires hanging, and you notice that, maybe there's some issues that may be structural, and your client absolutely loves it. What are your thoughts? What is your advice in light of those things? I'll give you guys some hints. You have Walter Wimbush on the line. Walter Wimbush is a home inspector.
Yes, you could have an expert put their eyes on it and let you know the degree or magnitude of the particular anomaly that you're looking at, and or additional costs, because it's a rapid moving market and people are moving in a pace that is, hey, take it the way it is, and patchwork repairs and things like that. So it's best to get an expert to put their eyes on it and say, oh, okay, this is in the budget. This is not that significant. It is a crack, but it is a minor crack. It's a hydration crack, not a structural crack, things like that. So the key would be to get an expert to put their eyes on it. I just got a call about an inspection. They agreed to take it as is, but they just want to make sure nothing's going on with it. So what she's saying is, get an expert to put some eyes on it, and don't miss out on the opportunity to have your home, your dream home, because of something minor, or maybe that you may misinterpret what it is.
Very well stated. I want to add another layer to that, because when your buyer client is excited and they really want a property, sometimes they are going to be willing to overlook certain things. But remember that you're there as their representative and you have to help protect their interests. You also have got to protect yourself and your license. So when you get to a property, the buyer's really excited about it, you notice a couple things that could be of minor concern or could be of major concern. You want to make sure that you highlight those things and you encourage a home inspection. No matter whether this is an aggressive market or not, if the buyer's purchasing as is, it should be as is with inspection. So for our porterhouse buyers, as is with inspection or with a property inspection contingency. You want to make sure that your buyer always has that layer of protection, and you want to articulate those things. If you see some items of concern, you want to articulate those things so that the buyer is able to pay attention to those in the home inspection. Because you want to make sure that, once all of the, kind of the glitz and the glamour of the excitement of the home wears off, they're not looking back saying, hey, I bought this home and, Angela walked on that home inspection with me and we noticed that this piece was, this was having some electrical concerns and she didn't say anything. Angela, why didn't you say anything to me about the electrical concerns? You're the professional. Why did you let me make this choice? And now this is becoming costly for me. Okay. So that's one thing. You make sure that you notate it, you highlight it to them, you have a professional to come and let them know whether it's a minor concern, if it's something you can throw a little bit of money at, or if it's actually a major concern. Okay. Another thing that you guys want to do is you're always going to negotiate, if possible, those repairs that are of major concern for the buyer. All right. As it pertains to those repairs, all of our porterhouse buyers should have home warranties. That's a part of our disclosures with the home warranty. You want to encourage them in writing, and so articulate it verbally, but then also in writing, because again, it's all about protection and peace of mind for the buyer. You want for them, after they've purchased their dream home, to be able to sleep peacefully at night, knowing that if there were issues, as many as possible were able to be uncovered and resolved. And if anything comes up after settlement, that they actually have protection so that they don't have to worry about extremely costly repairs as soon as they move into their new house. Does anybody have any questions about that? So let me ask you this. What if you are in a competitive market such as we're in now, and you have a buyer that they have fallen in love with the house and you see some items of disrepair that seem like they may be, major items, but the buyer is saying, oh my goodness, Darlene, I want to move into the property. I want this house today. What can we do? You tell me what actions you should take in order to make sure that you have crossed your T's and dotted your I's to protect your buyer and to protect yourself from buyer's remorse in the future. What should you do? What considerations should you make?
Well, one, for me, I would, we would discuss it. And I would definitely refer them to Mr. Winbush and have him give his expertise, his expert opinion about it. And then I probably would have a sidebar with you and Mr. Porter. But that's how I would handle it. I definitely would call on Mr. Winbush and would, talk to the buyer and just make sure that they understand what they're getting into. Like if it's something and he says, that it can't be repaired or can't be repaired, and they just have to have the house. I mean, what do you do? I can't talk. I'm not going to try to talk them out of it, because I mean, I would be not doing my job. I'm there to sell in my house, but I definitely don't want them to purchase something where they have buyer's remorse later on. But so I would cover myself by talking with Mr. Winbush, or having Mr. Winbush speak with them.
Excellent. Is there anything else that you guys would do?
Have a contractor give an evaluation as well. And that way you kind of have double jeopardy. and you say this is a contractor that looked on their eyes and they gave you more information as to what they would do and what their repairs are. And so that would qualify as them being fully informed.
Excellent. Is there anything else that you guys would think to do in that situation? I'll give you a hint. It's going to be very simplistic in nature. It's going to include either an email, text message, or some form of writing. Hey, Mr. Buyer, I'm excited to know that you're ready to move forward on property A. And before we prepare your offer, just wanted to highlight some of the things that we saw at the showing. We noted X, Y, and Z, just to make sure that these are not items of major concern. Hopefully, these are very minor concerns. We are going to have the inspector to take a look at these items. And as the inspector recommends, whether we need to have a contractor or whomever, then we'll move forward after that. You know, just confirm that you want to go ahead and make an offer on this property in light of these things, and we'll go ahead and get your offer submitted to the seller. So that's a very simple email or text message that you can send to the buyer so that you have highlighted those items that for you as an agent seem like that might be major things. Now, we're not talking about a need for paint or carpet or, you know, a light bulb out or something that is cosmetic. We're talking about things that could be potentially major issues for the buyer, okay? So just have some type of written communication to articulate in writing exactly what you would have said to them about them getting a professional to lay eyes on the property. Because when all goes well, it's perfect and there's no concern or nothing that comes back. But in the event that a buyer gets into a property and has buyer remorse, you want to make sure that you did everything necessary and you documented it. Because when that buyer is excited, they may overlook things that, again, like we said, once all the sheen has worn off and now they have buyer's remorse. So do your due diligence. All of your buyers should have inspections. You should, you know, document your communication with them, and then they should also have a home warranty, okay? So for all of our buyers, we're offering them home warranties. You know, guys, that we have two partners. So we have HWA and we have ARW home warranty. So they can work with those two. They can work with any company. They don't have to work with either of those companies. Those are just companies that we have partnered with to provide the service for our clients. They are free to choose any home warranty that they want. But you want to make sure that if they do not choose a home warranty, you put in writing that you strongly recommend that they purchase a home warranty for their property. And you send them a copy of some of the things that, you know, the home warranties that you have, you know, in your company can offer to help protect on their behalf. Because if they purchase the property and they don't have a home warranty, at some point or another, they're going to have some issue and they're going to wish they did. So make sure you document those things so that not only are you informing your buyer, you're reminding them, but then you're also keeping that documented track record for yourself. All right.
Ms. Porter.
Does anybody have any questions about that? Yes.
I do. I was just thinking, now I knew you were going to say something about documentation. I just didn't know what that would be. But let me ask you this. So when Mr. Winbush does the home inspection, and so say we had this conversation with the buyer and the buyer knows about this particular item, but they still want the house. Is it, and I agree with the email, but is it, could you like say, you know, he gives the printout and it's a picture and then it's an, you know, an explanation and he talks, you know, gives the history on whatever it is. Could you have them to initial that page?
So yes, you can have them to, you could have them to, but you really don't need them to, because the home inspector is going to send a copy of that report directly to the buyer. So they're going to get it. They absolutely will receive it.
No, I know that. I'm talking in terms of me taking that page or just, you know, just like they're signing off on it, that they know that this exists and they still want to purchase the home anyway.
That's not necessary.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, that's not necessary. It's not a part of the contract.
Okay.
That's a really good question, though. That's not necessary.
Okay. All right.
It's well understood when the inspection report goes over, it's going directly to the buyer. So they'll have the opportunity to lay their eyes on that. Okay.
Okay.
But we just want to make sure that we're protecting them even when they're not necessarily paying attention. All right. And protecting ourselves as well. All right, great questions, great insight, great feedback. Does anybody have any other questions or comments that they'd like to add to this page? All right, we'll go ahead and move on. Okay, so once you've established your showings and you're going on property tours, you have an active buyer now, you're looking to get them under contract. At a minimum, you should be talking to that buyer every other day. If you talk to them every day, great, but at a minimum, every other day for those active buyers, because we know how quickly this market changes. This market, a property will come on the market today and it could be gone tonight, or it'll come on the property, I'm sorry, on the market tomorrow and it may be gone the very next day. So actively following up with your active buyers is crucial, all right? Does anybody have any thoughts or questions with regards to that? Because that's very straightforward. All right, this next step, we're going to spend a little bit more time here. I just wanted to kind of open this up for conversation and make sure that everybody is following this process, because your offer preparation begins long before you actually put pen to paper in a manner of speaking. Your offer preparation begins once that buyer lets you know, hey, I am ready to write an offer on this property. You know, what do we need to do to move forward? What is one of the first things that you should do for that buyer? And the questions that I'm asking you guys, there's some hints on the screen right in front of you. So what should you do before you prepare an offer for that buyer?
Do a CMA to make sure that the home is priced, you know, according to what it should be.
Absolutely. So if you, let's say by chance, the property is $550,000, you do a CMA. The CMA shows comparables that are in the range from, you know, 530,000 on up to 590,000. What is the conversation that you're going to have with your buyer in this next phase, which is establishing the offer strategy? And that's in light of the current market that we're in, with all the competition and all those things in the market. You've noticed that there's a big range and the property is priced at the lower end, although there are comps to support a much higher sales price of the property. What conversations are you guys going to have with your buyer?
Well, if a seller is asking for highest and best, and you've done your research and you know what the homes are selling for, depending on your buyer's pre-approval amount, you can determine how high they can afford to go, and still not to not overpay for the property, or you can kind of estimate what it may appraise for based on what has already sold, based on your CMA.
Excellent. Is there anything else? All right, how about some strategies here, guys? In your buyer's offer, of course, you're including the residential contract of sale. Sometimes, however, the listing agent will consider an escalation clause. If the seller is willing to consider an escalation clause, then this will be a good time to use that, because for your buyer, you want to get them the property at the best deal possible for the buyer. However, you want to make sure that your buyer gets their contract ratified. And in a competitive market such as the one that we're in, most often the offer that's at list price is not the offer that's being accepted. And that depends very much on the market that you're in. So as we know, real estate is very hyper local. If you're talking about some of the more remote areas, that market is not going to be the same as it is in this very aggressive metropolitan area market. In this area, those list price offers are not the ones that are being accepted by and large. So when you're looking at that market analysis with your buyer, you're going to be able to see from that a comparative market analysis what the properties were listed for, what they sold for. You're going to be able to see the percentage of list price that it actually sold for. And if in that area properties were selling for, 103% to list price, or 107% to list price, or 97% to list price, you're going to be able to review that information from your comparative market analysis with your buyer so that you can help them to develop an offer strategy. Okay, from your comparative market analysis as well, you're also going to be able to establish what buyers are getting approved in terms of closing costs should a buyer need it, which hopefully in this market, most buyers are not asking for it. And that's what we've seen consistently for the last 2 years. But every now and again, you're going to come across a buyer who may need that. And if that is the case, this is information that you're deriving from your comparative market analysis. When you complete your comparative market analysis in Bright, it's going to give you a whole lot of information. And those are a couple of factors that you'll be able to see so that you're not pulling your strategy out of the air. You're dissecting the data that's going to be available to you in your comparative market analysis, and you're showing them to your buyer in an objective way to help your buyer to establish the best offer strategy. Okay, so that is going to happen before you even discuss the price with the buyer. That being said, a conversation that's worth having is with the lender and the buyer. Hey, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, we noticed that, this property we're able to go up to 590 or whatever the price was that we said we're able to go up to 590 and still have it appraised. But let's have a conversation with you and your lender and see what see how much you could actually increase your offer to should you get into a very competitive situation like that. If the buyer's okay with that, you guys reach out to the lender, have the buyer to reach out to the lender, you guys reach out to the lender together and say, hey, Mrs. Buyer A wants to buy such and such property. We expect that there's going to be competition. How much can buyer A increase her offer and still be pre-approved for that price? And the lender will let you know, and you should know that before you submit your offer on the property so that you know how much wiggle room the buyer has. Because when we're talking about competition, we're talking about potentially escalation clauses or submitting your buyer's highest and best right offhand. You need to know that your buyer can qualify for the increase if it is above what their pre-approval currently states. So you vet that information in advance before you ever put pen to pad, if you will. Okay. Anything else that you want to discuss with your buyer in terms of their strategy? All right, how about earnest money deposit? Earnest money deposit is one of those features of their offer strategy. It's one of those negotiation tools. You need to have conversations with the buyer and the lender in advance with regards to how much that buyer actually has in terms of, liquid assets, so you know how to structure their offer. We talked when I believe it was Curtis was sharing a scenario when the buyer had submitted an offer that they would pay all of the transfer and recordation, so forth and so on. Each one of the monetary features of your offer are negotiation tools. So not just the offer price. The offer price, your earnest money deposit, how much they're willing to pay in transfer and recordation, if they need any seller concession, if they can offer over and above. All of those factors directly impact the buyer's out-of-pocket expenses at closing. So you need to know how strong your buyer's financial position is so that you know what strategies you can use in order to get their offer accepted. So those are conversations that you're having with the buyer, you and the buyer are having with the lender so that you can come up with a strategy that's going to get your buyer's offer accepted on the property. Because the goal is not to submit an offer for the sake of submitting an offer. The goal is to win, okay? The goal is to get your buyer that property. So you want to find out what that looks like, what your buyer's highest and best is, and have them to put their best foot forward in a scenario that works for them. All right? How about other factors that should be taken into consideration when establishing the buyer's offer strategy? Is there anything else that we need to consider? And the offer strategy doesn't have to just be the financial component. I'll give you guys a hint. So there are going to be some things that the listing agent may include in Bright MLS. In those instructions, there are going to be some things that the listing agent may give you, insight as to, or those things may be located right in the seller's disclosure. As an example, say by chance, the seller needs a 30-day rent back, or they might need a 2-week rent back. Suppose they need those things, or suppose the seller needs a quick settlement date. or an extended settlement date. You know, whatever those things are that the seller needs, you want to make sure that you do your due diligence in advance to find this information out, do your research, so that when you're presenting an offer for your buyer, you're putting that buyer's best foot forward. So you are finding this information out from the lender, you're scouring Bright MLS to see what you can find in terms of instructions from the listing agent, in terms of information from the listing agent in a direct phone call, and then also in those sellers' disclosures. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions about that? All right. So now you are coming to the point. Go ahead. Yes.
So, what was I had the question in my head just like, when you're using that, such as the seller needing a rent back, how do you use that into your buyer's advantage?
That is a great question. Is there anybody on the line that would like to take a stab at that? All right, I'll give you guys a moment to think about it. And I'll go ahead and jump right in. When it comes to a rent back, if by chance you know that the seller needs a 2-week rent back and your buyer wants to make their offer very competitive, your buyer may include in their offer free rent back for seller for 2 weeks, right? That is a financial consideration, because if the seller has to sell their property, but they need somewhere to live for 2 weeks, do you think that that will make your buyer's offer more or less favorable if your buyer is offering to give the seller a 2-week rent back? And that could be for free with a deposit, or, you know, it could be at a nominal expense, or it could be an extended rent back, or whatever that looks like, not too far extended, because you wanted to make sure the buyer gets into that property. But if they need a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, say by chance the seller says, I need, 3 days, you may say, okay, well, up to a week or something like that. But that is definitely a negotiation factor. Great question. All right. So next, once you've gathered all of that information, that's when you're going to start completing the offer for the buyer. And that's when you're going to go, you would have already created and brokerment your transaction, and you would have already pulled your buyer's checklist into there. You're going to pull in that buyer's pre-approval. You're going to pull in a copy of that buyer's earnest money deposit. You're going to pull in the seller's disclosures, and then have your buyer to write a letter to the seller as well. Those are going to be components of your offer in addition to the actual offer documents themselves that will complete the buyer's offer before you send it over to the listing agent. Does anybody have any questions about that? All right, let's go on to negotiating offers. And we are going to dive very deeply into this negotiation offers piece, but just not tonight. Tonight, we're doing an overview, okay? As it pertains to negotiating offers, you want to make sure that all of the terms that your buyer is requesting they are explicitly stated in that contract. There should not be any blank fields that, your buyer wants you to actually, submit something on their behalf, and then you just make sure that we're doing our due diligence to make sure that all of the buyer's interests are represented right there in the contract, and everything that pertains to their financial terms are there. So from the purchase price to where the deposit is going to be held, how much is going to be held, when it's going to be submitted, so forth and so on. Make sure all of that information is reflected. And then as it pertains to the date of contract acceptance, on the last page of your contract, this date is very important, where it says date of contract acceptance. Can anybody tell me why that date is really important? And it has something to do with contingency periods.
Yeah, it starts the clock as to when you're actually ratified. When you actually have a ratified contract.
Perfect. So if you have a buyer and they submit their offer on Thursday, and the seller and the buyer don't come to terms and fully agree to everything until next week, Tuesday, when is your date of ratification? Is it the date that the offer was submitted, or is it next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday. And that's why this last page of the contract is important, because that's the date of contract acceptance, right? If anything were to, you know, unfold, or if you had to come back and verify your contingency periods, you don't want to have to scour through the contract and look at all the dates to figure out when the last signature was stamped on your contract. You want to have that information highlighted already, because just like Angela stated, that's when the clock starts. That's when all of your contingencies begin. All right. In terms of coordinating the transaction, this piece you guys should know like the back of your hands. If anybody has any questions or further insight that they'd like, let's go ahead and talk about it. But in terms of coordinating the transaction, as soon as you are ratified, you should be sending out an email. Your email should be to the title company, the lender, the listing agent, but also your buyer. Your buyer should have a copy of this ratified contract, right? So if you send this email out, you BCC your buyer, because you don't want them to have the buyer's information, or you send it to your buyer separately. And then you send this information to the title company, the lender, and the listing agent all in one email. You should be creating an email thread so that all of the professionals in the transaction that are going to be working, you know, in tandem with you to make sure that this contract gets to closing, they all receive this at the same time, okay? So that they can start processing this transaction on your buyer and the seller's behalf, all right? Now, as it pertains to your documents, as soon as you get this ratified contract, you're gonna be submitting it in Brokerment, right? Because in Brokerment, you will have already created your transaction, you've submitted your offer through Brokerment, your buyer signed off on it in Brokerment, you know, the seller would have signed off on it, and then that ratified contract, you upload it into your transaction. And it's a simple button that you click on the right-hand side, which we will go through. And that is how you submit it for review, all right? Just like you submit it to the title company, the lender, the listing agent, and the buyer, as soon as you get that contract ratified, in the same way, the brokerage has to have it at the exact same time. We got to make sure that everything is done the way it needs to be done to help protect our clients, all right? After everybody has gotten through that, you're going to go through the various contingencies with the inspector, with the inspector and the appraiser as well. You're walking your buyer through the process. And in your buyer consultation, you would have given them an overview of what this process looks like so they know what to expect once their contract is ratified. So they're going to know, hey, once you're ratified, that's when you need to pay the inspector. And that's when you're going to need to pay the appraiser. And we're going to work our way through that onto settlement. All right. Now, because we have the privilege of having Walter Wimbush on the line, Walt, instead of me going through this next page, I'll have you to articulate some of the most prominent features of the property inspection that you're going to be looking for and that our agents should have their eyes open for so as to be able to help to protect the buyer on the home inspections. Walter, do you have your audio set up there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. I missed that, Jasmine. Is this?
No problem. So this inspections page, after our buyers have ratified their contract and we sent it over to all the parties in the transaction, next their inspection is coming up. So would you just walk us through very quickly what items kind of come up most on the home inspection, things that we need to pay attention to make sure to point out?
Yeah, so when you're looking at this page here, it's pointing at the roof. And the first item, the most expensive item for the most part, and the item that can cause the most damage if not addressed is the roof. So we want to look at the roof and check the age of the roof, what's the remaining life of the roof and kind of the status of the roof. And then we kind of go down from there. Now, what I have found, and then I have a document that's out that I did some statistical data. The things that we have most problems with are electrical and plumbing. And as you get into older houses for certain, because there's a shortage, there's an article out in the Baltimore Sun that there's a shortage of skilled professionals, not people that are willing to do something, people that are skilled and professionals or licensed. And so plumbing and electrical tend to lead the way. on defects with homes. And obviously you want to look at the roof because the roof will cause damage to the interior carpet and flooring. Those are some of the main and primary things we look at, of course, along with structuring and all the other things. Structural problems are not the primary problem at all. They're much further down the line. So it's going to be roof, plumbing, and electrical. And then also, because there are many renovations done on homes now of recent, we just want to check the quality of the renovations that were done. And maybe at a later point, this is very important, and I hope to talk about this at another time with more detail, is also permits.
Excellent. Thank you for that. All right. Your appraisal, that's what comes next. When your buyer gets their appraiser, oftentimes the lender will send it to both you and the buyer. What things as an agent should you be looking for on the appraisal report? And I'll give you guys a hint. It pertains to conditions from the lender. So as it pertains to lender required repairs, of course, you're going to be looking to make sure that the property appraised for value, appraised for at least contract price, if not above. But then you're also going to be looking for conditions on that appraisal, because you want to see if there are any items that the buyer and the seller are going to have to negotiate, or that the seller is going to have to take into account before you can get to settlement. And unlike the property inspection, which is between the buyer and the seller, the appraisal, if there are any conditions that are listed on those become lender required repairs. Does anybody have any questions about that? All right, home warranties. Just like we talked about, each one of our porterhouse buyers should be covered with a home warranty. You can either negotiate your home warranties into your contract so that your buyer or your seller pays for them. If the seller pays, great. If the buyer, if the seller doesn't pay, it is a nominal expense to provide the level of protection that it provides to our clients. They're between $500 and $600 for a whole year for coverage for the buyer. Oftentimes, if buyers have to get, if they have to get those services completed after settlement, those repairs can be into thousands of dollars. So make sure that they are covered. If the buyer elects not to have a home warranty, you make sure that you have something in writing, that you have advised them that it is best for them to have a home warranty, and have them to decline it in writing to you. All right. Now, when you get to the point where you're having a final walkthrough because everything went well, you're making sure that if there are, let me take a step back. I left out something very important on this inspection piece, inspection notice. In the event that you guys are requesting repairs from the seller, this is the document that you're going to submit to the seller to request those repairs on. It is the property inspection notice. And very specifically, the property inspection notice opposed to a general addendum, because there's certain language that's articulated in this property inspection notice that has specifications for, the way that the work has to be completed by a licensed professional, so forth and so on. And there are lots of protections for the buyer in that document that are not in a general addendum. Okay, so make sure that you include that property inspection notice for any repairs that have been agreed to between the buyer and the seller. All right. Next, your final walkthrough. When you finish up with all of that, you guys are about to go to settlement and you're about to celebrate with your buyer their new house, your final walkthrough addendum is going to be necessary. And you want to do this before settlement. You can do it the morning before settlement. That's great. But it's better oftentimes if you do it maybe a day before settlement. Some people like to do it 5 days before settlement. I think that's too far in advance because anything could happen in 5 days. But if you do it the day before settlement, then if there are any items that need to be rectified, then that gives the buyer and the seller some time to come back and to negotiate before they get to the settlement table. Okay. We'll talk about some language that needs to be included in your final walkthrough addendum as well, in the event that there are items that the seller still has to repair after settlement. So we'll go into all of that. And then your settlement. You're preparing for settlement with your buyer. of course, what is one of the things that you should be doing to prepare for settlement with your buyer? And this is going to be a given. This is something that you want to review for your buyers. You want to make sure that your buyer has received. You want to make sure that you have received. You're going to use this to verify expenses. You're going to use this to verify that anything that the seller is paying, they're paying. What is that document called that you are reviewing in advance with your buyer to prepare for settlement? Closing disclosure. If you get that, your pre-settlement, your ALTA, your preliminary ALTA, or your closing disclosure, you're getting this at least 3 days before settlement. You should be reviewing this with your buyer, okay? In your brokerment library, there's going to be a section in your checklist when you're working with buyer's checklist that's going to ask you if you've received it or verify that the lender sent it over to the buyer. The lender can send it either 6 days or 3 days before settlement to make sure that the buyer is able to close on time. But as the real estate professional, you want to guarantee that the buyer has received it and you both have had a chance to lay your eyes on it. The purchase price, you're going to verify all of that information on there. You're going to verify any concessions from the seller. You're going to verify if you get a copy of that final disclosure before settlement that your commission is listed there. Whatever the transfer and recordation is, the buyer's earnest money deposit, all of those numbers that are articulated in your contract, you want to verify those numbers on your closing disclosure before you get to settlement. Even your commission that it needs to be paid by the buyer. Because we noticed that sometimes in the market, oftentimes in the market, the seller may be paying 2.5% commission and the buyer might be responsible for 0.5% commission. You want to make sure that that is outlined on the closing disclosure so that you are getting your full commission. Lastly, if the buyer has not paid their $7.95, their brokerage fee up front, then you want to make sure that that is also reflected on the closing disclosure so that you can have a happy settlement. All right, I'm trying to get us off a little bit early tonight, although we're at 8:19 now. I wanted to get us off by about 8:15 so we can run through this briefly, and I want to let you guys go. After settlement, you want to follow up because that's when the referrals start. You've done all of the hard work, the heavy lifting in advance to convert them from a lead to a buyer to a client, and now they are closed and they're in their new home. This next phase is going to be very important because this is how you're going to multiply your business in your follow-up and your service to those buyers after settlement. You're going to be checking on them after settlement. You're going to be including them in your drip campaign. You're going to be scheduling their housewarming party. You're going to be doing a 6-month follow-up, a 1-year follow-up, and you're going to be sending them cards and mailers and keeping in touch with your buyers after settlement. All right, guys. Does anybody have any questions, any comments, new insight, final thoughts, or anything before we end tonight? All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. Give me 1 second.